Wormrot, Hiss, album review, let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about the latest album from Wormrot. These guys are a grindcore act out of Singapore, and they've been doing some pretty cool stuff for a while now. They started making some waves in the early 2010s, mostly due to the success of their debut album, Abuse, and yeah, I liked it too. It was a crushing 22 minutes of really throttling riffs and just putrid vocals. And while I thought that some of the shorter tunes on here were maybe a little gimmicky for my liking, if that makes sense, I did like the album a lot overall. It was pretty well produced and well performed. But if anything, all my reservations were almost completely wiped out with their follow-up album, Dirge. This ended up becoming one of my favorite grindcore releases of the last 10 years. This album is awesome. It is blistering. It is so well produced. And by the time their 2016 album Voices came out, I thought they were putting out some of their best stuff. Their songwriting had come full circle. The sonic, massive sound on this album was really impressive. It just sounded so good. And I can say a lot of the same things about the singles leading up to this album. And yeah, this album overall, it's really good. I mean, we haven't heard from them in quite some time. It's been like 6 years, but honestly, they haven't missed a step. And we get that right away with The Darkest Burden. And honestly, it takes its time as an intro, which is something that shocked me. But on the contrary, it really does a really great job of bringing in an atmosphere, making just the sound so gloomy and so doom-inducing. And what follows up is pretty guttural, pretty soul-crushing. It's a great start to this album. It reminds you that they really haven't missed a step. Also, I love the dual vocals on this track. I mean, we get the standard grindcore vocals, but we also get a deeper, more almost black metal-inspired vocals as well. It's something we get a lot of on this album. I love Broken Maze even more. It's almost campy at points, and we also get some much more clearer sung vocals that pop in occasionally that actually add for a nice touch. It's not something that I'm accustomed to hearing from Wormrot, but honestly, it works really well. It's actually something I kind of wish we heard more of. But outside of that, you know what you're getting. You're getting the ruthless riffs. You're getting these intense breakdowns and violence. Then we get Behind Closed Doors. I can't tell you just how great this sounds. It's so crystal clear. I love how tortured these vocals sound. Like they just sound like they're like calling out from another dimension, and these instrumentals do not hold a single punch. Then we have When Talking Fails, It's Time for Violence. I've loved this since the second it dropped as a single. The intense solos, the breakneck drums, these angsty group vocals that pop in for the chorus that shows some punk rock roots, which I like as well. It's a great sound. It's maybe the best track here, and not only that, it's a great jumping in point if you're not familiar with their work. Your Dystopian Hell, on the other hand, starts off oddly triumphant. There's a lot of tracks on here that almost pull from black metal with just how epic they sound. It works as a great sort of call to arms before this track just descends into just complete despair and bleakness with no hope in sight. It is just as soul-crushing as you can imagine, and the drumming throughout this entire album is pretty freaking awesome. And the tortured vocals, it's so over the top, but I love it. Hatred Transcending seems to pull from punk as well with this very streamlined riff. It's really good though. It's noisy, it's punchy, and when it takes off, it's one of the most obliterating things here. And once again, I do really like the dueling vocals. I think it sets Wormrot apart. They are revolting in the best way for sure. Doomsayer, on the other hand, as far as like a short form track goes, look no further. It takes no time at all descending into chaos, but as far as like compared to some of the other sore thumbs on this album, this one is a complete thought. That's all I ask. And the thundering bass and the guitar work on this track are really great too. Also, Voiceless choir is just abrasive ear candy. I love the streamlined riff that we get here, and the whispered vocals, which add for a really cool dynamic. It's so haunting, and the guitar solo we get is easily one of the best here. And those rowdy group vocals, I continue to really love them, and it's times like this that really Wormrot set themselves apart, and that's really important. Most of this album's really, really enjoyable. I mean, there are some sore thumbs. I still have some consistency issues, like Unrecognizable. It's 11 seconds, it's a blast of energy, but that's about it. I don't remember anything about it. These shorter tunes, like, I can imagine them being a blast, being heard live in a mosh pit, but on album, I don't know, they just seem a little incomplete. Pale Moonlight, I have a lot of the same thoughts. I mean, it does, on one hand, add a lot of atmosphere to this album, which I love, but it really doesn't do anything outside of that. It really kind of just sets things up for the next tune here, which just happens to be my least favorite track here, Seizures. Honestly, this is far from Wormrot at their best. It has a lot of the same bare bones material as a lot of the other tracks on this album, in a big way. But truthfully, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of it sounds rehashed. The usual thunderous bass just doesn't seem as exciting, and the vocals are really wishy-washy. And borderline, it just gets obnoxious at times. I just know they could do so much better, and they do. Noxious Cloud, it's faceless for me. I mean, one thing I've always enjoyed about Wormrot is their personality, which they have a lot of, but it doesn't come through here. I mean, yeah, this blast of energy will get things moving down in the pits, but that's about it. And Spiral Eyes, it's fine, but it's one of few moments here where I just feel like it's more of the same and not really exciting. It just doesn't stop me in my tracks, neither will All Will Wither. It's just a damn afterthought, this track, isn't it? It really doesn't add anything either. Outside of that, though, as far as the heavier side of music goes, this is required listening. By the time we get to Grieve, we are on a whole different level of hell. Here we get the first of many incorporations of these really twisted, horrifying strings. I don't even know how they did this, but it is so hellish and it will stick with you. It's one of the nicer surprises here. I wish they did more like this. And while they do ease up on the gas a little, Sea of Disease is one of my favorite tracks here. It's not as suffocating. As a matter of fact, it's triumphant and even beautiful in parts, all while remaining a little crunchy. It's a twist that I didn't see coming, so much so that when things do take a turn for the heavier in the second portion of this track, it seems refreshed, new. Desolate Landscapes, once again, is a really great medium, but the sort of triumphant sounds of, the last track I talked about, but the sort of disgusting, bloodied underbelly of the rest of this album. Urgency is key here. It sounds like they were literally rushing to get this track to you. In the best way, because it's really exciting and it doesn't seem rehashed. I love the sheer amount of impending doom on Vicious Circle. It's just so dreary. There's no hope in sight, and between the shifty riff and the weird production tricks that they pull out here, it's wild. It's these moments that are the most rewarding. Weeping Willow as well. This track is ridiculous. This shows them going into the upper registry of some of their chords, and it's something you don't get to hear a lot of here, but it's really interesting. That, alongside of the return of these whispered, very tortured vocals, and the return of the even more tortured strings, makes for a wild experiment. And Glass Shards, as a finale, what even is this? This is the wildest and biggest left turn here. First off, the playing on this entire track is ridiculous. But as far as an epic sound from Wormrot goes, look no further. Here we get the strings. We get these woodwinds too, I think, as well as set to this backdrop of doom and death. It's also oddly really emotional, which is something I did not think that they had in them. Yeah, you should go listen to this album. I mean, yeah, for my liking, there's still some consistency issues, specifically in the shorter tracks. I don't know, they just don't move me or really make me think about anything, or just maybe want to return to them unless I'm seeing them live, I feel like. But still, Wormrot's doing some really cool stuff in grindcore right now. They're whipping out some really interesting experiments on this album. There's some great left turns. It's well produced. It's really well performed. Their songwriting just seems to get better as well. If you're into grindcore or the heavier side of rock music, go check this out. It's one of the better things you're going to hear this year. I'll be on a light 8 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.